So mahalo again, everyone, for your patience in this endeavor. I know it's been a little bit crazy, and so while we're trying to get the technical difficulties sorted out, we wanted to have Camille and Uncle Charlie share some of their mana'o. So I just wanted to introduce both of them. Camille Kalama, who introduced herself earlier, is an attorney with the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. She joined the staff there in 2006. Perfect. She joined so I'll do a brief introduction and then we'll watch the movie and then we'll go back. So she joined the staff there in 2006 after clerking for a year with the Hawaii Supreme Court with Chief Justice Ronald T.Y. Moon. And as an attorney at NHLC, she has worked on a range of issues and is one of the attorneys who's litigating this case in East Maui right now. So she can help to provide some important context on the issue in general and on this case in particular. We're also very fortunate to have Uncle Charlie Rappoon with us here. As he mentioned, Uncle Charlie is very well renowned as a kalo farmer from Waihole Valley. And his ohana does truck farming, everything from cacao and corn to a host of other issues. Uncle Charlie is one of the handful of people who shaped water use and management in Hawaii today. Together with his brother Paul, they were the lead clients in the Rappoon versus Board of Water Supply case, which in 1982 was instrumental in really reasserting the public trust in Hawaii's waters, and in addition in helping to establish a framework for appurtenant and riparian rights. Uncle Charlie also helped to draft the Water Code, the Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 174C, which is currently the framework for water use and management in Hawaii today. In addition to that, he has participated in other cases, including the groundbreaking Waihole Ditch litigation that helped to interpret the code and really set the framework for stream restoration. It was the first time ever in Hawaii's history that water was ordered restored to the streams and communities of origin. So when I said earlier that he taught me most of everything that I know about water, I wasn't joking. We're very lucky to have his many years of expertise and struggle in this important issue. So that is your very well-respected panel.
But she used the word white man is coming to take away our water. So the truth was spoken in that.
They say that by water all things find life, and for over 100 years the water has been drained from East Maui through a series of canals and diversions built by powerful sugar corporations back in the late 1800s. Our kupuna strongly opposed the building of diversions and the taking of the water. But like in most cases, the voices of the native Hawaiian people oftentimes went unheard. East Maui, with its beautiful and pristine beaches and spectacular, breathtaking views, is perhaps one of the most beautiful locations in all of Hawaii. But what truly makes East Maui a special place is its people, 5/8 of which are Native Hawaiian.
The people of this land, the people who live here, have a long lineage of beliefs and practices that are still practiced today. It's very different from what they see in Waikiki, and it's very different from probably what they think they know about Hawaiian people. So know that, we have a culture that is thousands of years old, and many of those practices those beliefs are still carried on and practiced the same way. Many have changed, but there are some that have stayed the same all those years, and that needs to be recognized and respected.
We are blessed. We truly are blessed. So I consider Hana to really be a special place, a really special place. The only thing I see that about Hana is the real estate, the land, especially large tracts of land that have single ownerships, and the price tags that are on the land.
It's depressing the state we're in right now. It's just, it got worse and worse. And like I drive to that side, the Kupahulu side, and you see all these gates. I never did see gates before. All these rock walls and gates. And you drive past the local's house and no gate, it's all open, you know, everybody's car in the yard, and then gate, and then uncle's house, and gate, on two sides of the road. It just seems like, yeah, there's a lot of people that we don't know. It's so interesting because, you know, sometimes you go to meetings, like I'm on the Hana Advisory Committee, or I go to some things, and there's so many people there. And I have no clue who they are. But they all claim to live in Hana and be members of the Hana community. And I never seen them before in my life. I mean, I went to one thing, and I never know not one person there. And they all said they lived here. Years they lived here. I was thinking, you must be the one who lived behind that gate.
So we got this influx of friendly Americans buying up all the property. And it's happening here in Hana too. People that had property and homes were local at the time, sold their homes and moved, went away to Honolulu, moved somewhere in the state. But there's a lot of people that were looking for property in Hana from outside. Even to go door to door and make proposals to those people that are living there, you know. Outrageous kind of proposals, but they wanted a piece of property, they wanted some.
Because there's not too many places like this anymore. And it's not only hanging on to the aina, you must malama aina. You must malama the people and your community. And kupuna must speak with wisdom, because there are hard times coming. Very difficult times are coming. We need to go back to the aina who have opportunity to. And ones who have opportunity should open their doors to allow others to come for the day and learn what you have learned from your kupuna, to perpetuate our culture to its full extent.
Cannot just say, oh, I do hula on Mondays and Wednesdays. Or, yeah, I go fishing sometimes. You gotta be a practitioner of your culture. You have to live those things. Those things have to be in your daily life. And you gotta teach others about it. And you gotta teach your kids about it and your cousins about it, because that's how those traditions stay alive. And that's how we as a people are identified, and we become pa'a and strong with the place, with the land. So that no matter who moves in and no matter how many gates are put up, the ku'aina of the land are still on the land, still practicing those traditions that have been passed down generation after generation.
All I want to teach the values that I was taught. And each Hawaiian, whether you from Loi or you are a voyager, or martial arts, whatever you into the culture, we all must hold a statue as Kanaka. And you have to be proud of your Hawaiian heritage. Be proud of who gave you this heritage. Only a few of us are left. There's no time for fighting each other. It's time to make peace. It is time to look at a nation, a Hawaiian nation.
So for those people who moved away, I would say come back. You know, that's a hard thing, yeah, with because get plenty hui land, but hard to come back on that hui land because ohana might get hakaka and stuff. But somebody got to start. Somebody got to start to come back, and the others who are not coming back got to be supportive. We all got to kako each other because that's the only way that we're going to be steadfast. And that's the only way we're going to make it known to the generations that come after us and to the people who are not a kuaina of the land that we are here. Even though there might not be many of us, even though we might not have plenty of money, even though not all of us are educated, we have these traditions that we practice. And we are Hawaiian because we practice those traditions and we're still on the land that we came from.
Take a look around here. Where are they? They used to farm. Used to come back and farm.
So I was doing this for, you know, keep the tradition going and the Hawaiian culture. It's all from my grandparents. It's all in Kanawai and Cecilia. And I enjoy doing this. It's what I love. It's all from, you know, from the heart.
People depend on these resources to feed their families. It goes back to the Ahupua'a system where in this section of land could provide everything a person could need to survive. When the water was taken away, you took away what people had for thousands of years, and that was sustainability.
Right now, the Hawaiian people throughout the islands, and especially living in Hawaii, are under serious attack from our cultural perspective. All the resources have been depleted from the natural resources, from fresh water to the ocean. Our people needs to eat our Hawaiian diet, food, taro, luau, ulu, but all of this is gone. Our people also needs to gather fish from the rivers, from the streams, opai, hi'iwai, from the ocean. It's all gone. And if you talk about economics, it is out of reach for our people and many others.
Other than the city, the state, and the county, it's tough for people to find work over here. So we lose a lot of the young adults to jobs away from here. But I'm still prayerful and hopeful that they'll bring their talents back home. You know, even though we don't really offer that much. I remember the season when we had half a dozen people get up at 3:30, 4:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and drive out to work, some of them in Lahaina. Get home in the evening to be with their families and get some rest and drive out again in the morning. You know, that's a hardship, but they did it. Cars didn't last very long when they had to do that. So it's not, I want to say, it's not cheap to live in Hana. Take a look at Rio Express when they come in from the other side. All our goods come by truck and they come in here. So once the store gets a hold of them after The producers have paid Rito to bring it in. They mark them up in the store, put them on the shelves, and we've got to buy, you know, which is why most people drive to the other side and shop, because it's cheaper over there. But that's just some of the things I see happening in Hana. The ranch is a big factor because it's a caretaker of the land, but it doesn't provide jobs. 4 or 5 spots, and that's it. Cattle is the big industry over here, but everything's shipped away. They used to provide for the stores, and they tried bringing it back from the packers, but I guess it didn't pan out, so meat doesn't come back here. I'd probably buy a steak at the store now that came from New Zealand or from California or somewhere else, where it's cheaper to produce them. But those are some of the changes. A lot of people love the ocean, so we'll always have the ocean. And we got really resentful of the fact that outside boats and Big Island boats used to come in and fish on the reef grounds that are outside of Hana, and we used to hate that. Because we felt that the resources belong to Hana, so why take our fish back to the Big Island or back to Kahului? Why not leave it here? I mean, if I have to go to Mama's Fish House to eat a fish that came from Hana, that's crazy.
That is how Isai Hui started a couple years ago, was because a lot of the fishermen and hunters are just frustrated. You know, they would go to their hunting spot and would have 3 trucks over there in the morning, and they don't know who those trucks belong to. Or, you know, they would pass their fishing spot and somebody would be coming up. Or they would go to a fishing spot and wouldn't have certain fish, and I think they just got frustrated, and so they had this meeting. They got together and had a meeting, and it started like that, with everybody just voicing their frustrations about what's happening. You know, DLNR is not helping the situation. I mean, we're not blaming DLNR because they only have so many workers, yeah, per island.
We malama the land. We're good caretakers, I think, of the land. We just don't own the land. So it's kind of hard when you don't, but we can be vocal when we see it being abused.
Started off with that frustration, and you know, there were a group of people who agreed that, you know, we got to do something. We gotta voice our opinions about how we feel about our resources, and that was it. It was just pretty much the main thing was educating other locals, you know, even the people in our community about the resources, because usually the people who came in was ohana or friends of people who live in a community. So that's how it started. But you know, you got people who got upset. You get brothers who get bad tempers. And so we had some bad incidences, a few bad incidences that gave the East Side Hui a really bad rap in the beginning. And but we still try to get out there and talk to people, talk to the community about what our mission was, which was educate and preserve the resources of East Maui and educate others about what we have. So I know it was really heavy in the beginning, because we had, after all those things happened with a few people who joined the East Side Hui, lost their tempers, did certain things to other people. It got reported, and then we ended up having a big meeting with the FBI, with the police, and we got everything straightened out. DLNR was there, and so, you know, even it was unfortunate that all of those things happened, and that East Side Hui did get a bad rap. But I think the best thing that came out of it is that people knew, and everybody knew, that when you come to Hana or when you come to East Maui, eyes gonna be watching.
Native Hawaiians have always had great insight into maintaining their sustainability. Even in ancient times, they placed kapu restrictions on the gathering of certain fish during certain times of the year. They also knew how important it was to allow fresh water to reach the ocean and designed their taro patches with this in mind. The fresh water that was diverted into the taro patch was eventually released back into the rivers and streams.
The passage you see here is not just only the taro, you know, with the water. You have opu in there, you have opai. Like right now, this time of the year, you see millions of them. They hatch, and they all going up into the lower, like the nursery. Stay for about a month or two, and then going through the pipe and all the way back up to the mountains. And at least about 1 time or 2 times a year, some of the hatches, and all the babies come from the ocean. They start coming up. They end up coming right up into the lowies. And it's what the taro patch is one way of kind of like saving them. Like in the streams, once in a while you get big water, all of them get washed up into the ocean. You gotta keep coming up again, and they get washed back down. But the taro patch, the water cannot get in it. So they have a chance to, what do you call it, you know, just relax and wait for, you know, they get a little bigger and then they start going through the pipe. And how you could tell, if I turn the water off, you see them all over, just like ants, there's thousands of them. And when I see that, then you kind of like turn the water back on, and I leave it for until 2 months at least. Then you turn it off again, then you could see they all disappear. So things like that I've been doing my own research up here. And it's a lot of, the opais kind of like feed those fishes into the sea, you know. You find the moe, the hole, all them feeding, right now they're feeding on the babies. So you go down at the ocean, you could see all that, yeah. This is the kind of stuff that we try to protect.
The water don't belong to me, it don't belong to you. It belongs to the kalo, it belongs to the stream, and it belongs to the ocean. So, you know, everything go full circle as far as connection. Right now, that circle is kind of like broken right now. We need the vine, and we need to protect it. Not only for just the oil pouring the vine, but the full environment. If we talk about preserving the environment, well, this is one way of preserving the environment, putting water back. Whether they got taro patches or they don't, put water back in the river. Because it's a natural thing. It's not unnatural. Man has made it unnatural by dewatering and false propaganda that water going to the ocean is waste. It's not waste. It's keeping that fragile environment balanced. Man is destroying Earth and nobody else.
As stewards or caretakers of the land, many Native Hawaiians have become deeply concerned with the destructive role Western society has had on Mother Earth and her natural resources.
When people say they must have a win-win situation, it is not our responsibilities that private entities, corporations, cannot continue farming or running a business. We're not about that. We're about rights. And these are our rights that has been impacted for over 130 years. For in the 1800s, people were already against the diversions.
Native Hawaiians strongly opposed the building of these diversions, but you know, if you look into our history, Native Hawaiians did not have a right to vote. A law was passed back in the late 1800s to take away the rights where you could not vote unless you own land. And many Native Hawaiians did not own land, so they did not have a say in the decision-making process, even though they made up majority of the population. And that continues to this day. If you look at our political arena and the state legislature, we're not really represented out there. It's really difficult to get a fair shake in the decision-making process when it comes to issues of native rights.
But today in Wailoa Nui, in 2008, as we speak, the conditions are just horrific in the conditions we have to farm it, being that we have no water. A lot of invasive plants invading this aina, but mostly it's the water. And today I cannot farm, and my family is low.
But there was always the crown lands, and this lands was from the Ali'i. And the lands are designated throughout the state of Hawaii, entitled crown lands, all lands that set aside for the native Hawaiian people. In this area, the district is called Ko'olau of East Maui, not Hana, Ko'olau of East Maui. We have a fixed boundary. It's a district. From Makaiva to Ole'ino, from Makai to Mauka, in this whole district, which consists approximately about 33,000 acres or more, is considered crown lands. The crown lands has never been addressed ever since the overthrow. And that needs to be addressed today before any drop of water go out of the crown lands. But in 1985, Uncle Harry Mitchell and others from the community established a contested case for Wai'o Stream. And it was only Wai'o Stream alone. Native Hawaiian legal corporations were the lawyers. Alan Murakami, who is still our lawyer, was the lawyer for Uncle Harry and the clients at that time. But 7 years went by because Uncle Harry got sick and then he finally passed away. But the case was still open. So when, Uncle Harry was he was a hero, for all the things he's done in his time, good things he did, for the Hawaiian people. So Alan, knowing, Uncle Harry passed away, started thinking about the case. So he contacted me because he found out that we were starting to establish and organize the community. And he asked me about the case and the people, and I went out looking for him, and many was dead, many was gone, wasn't anybody left. So Alan asked us, we had a meeting over here in Maui, and he said, what we're going to do about it. And it was only one river. So the community said, okay, let us think about this, what we're going to do. And that's when we brought out the maps, the Ko'olau. So we selected, the 27 streams and rivers are selected in the Ko'olau. Many of our government officials, and especially here in the islands in the state of Hawaii, have been practicing this method for many years, and they were successful. But today with the new breed, the new generation, people with their backs up against the wall are wiser. And there is the only way out to stand firm for your rights. And that's all we have right now, holding us together, our native rights. And this case is not only about us as Kanaka who live here in the Aupa, Wailoa Nui, Ke'anai, or in the Ko'olau. It is all for all Kanaka. Crown lands. We all have vested interest in it.
Yeah, they only take so much, and when they think overflow, then the floodgates fill up and then things pass down to the natural stream. Because they cut their ditch across the stream, man. They gotta have one gate, so when the thing overflow, the thing.
See, this is man-made, bro. This is not that the thing was the Hawaiians didn't make this. This didn't make this. Yamai made this ditch, this diversion, coming from Kulani, and it's still in operation when it rains. So this water service well, Uncle. East Wailoa Nui Stream. East Wailoa Nui comes down to Bush, myself. Waikane. So East Wailuna Stream service Waikane, and Waikane service Uncle Dem's Lo'i. Right now they're in the Moana. So hopefully the monitor, Morris Atta, he has all the power today to release water so that we can relieve Uncle Dem and they can farm.
Stay moving, just gotta stay out across you. Yeah, go.
East Maui Irrigation leases the land for $156,000 a year for over 60 billion gallons of water. They pay a fifth of a penny per 1,000 gallons. Billions of dollars has been made throughout the years with subsidies from the federal government and dewatering a whole district of 33,000 acres to provide water for their 30,000 acres of dry land. And a great impact devastated our people. The corporation made billions, and we are on the verge of losing our traditional way that our forefathers taught us how to do with the lo'i, to provide for your family, the food source. What I get out of this after all these years, I was lied to. My conclusion, they are thieves and liars, and the state of Hawaii included. They must fulfill and uphold their fiduciary duties. This is not about making friends. It's about rights. Do we have rights or don't we? Tell us. Enough playing this game. And it's been a difficult challenge, and I saw many people pass away. Many people waiting for the decision throughout the years. I've seen many young generation go off to war from this village too. And many of us, my age, served time in Vietnam. And we went there to fight for rights. And they cannot tell me I have no rights. You will never hear the end of it. And the decision lies in the Commission again and BLNR, the Board of Land and Natural Resources. But I feel good that they will make the right decision. For us to talk story with the East Maui Irrigation or Alexander and Baldwin, the talking is over. Release the water.
Much time because I appreciate how patient everyone's been. Just to remind you folks, we have Uncle Charlie Rapoon here with us, who has, I don't know, 40-year history of these issues, has worked on water issues for many, many decades and has great perspective on stream restoration and sort of how the framework for what is happening now in East Maui was laid. And then in addition, we have Camille Kalama, who is the real powerhouse behind this case, even though she wasn't thanked in the film, and who has been working very actively on these issues on behalf of Namokua Punio Ko'olau, the litigants in the case. And so right now, we just would like to have them come up here and share their reflections and mana'o on the video, and then if you folks have any specific questions, they're happy to take those as well.
I'm going to do a little bit of background on the case, since it wasn't totally laid out in the film, but I wanted to know if anybody here is from Maui. Oh wow, Kona, I never knew that. Okay, that helps. You're from Maui too? Oh no? My genealogy is from Maui too, but I grew up on Oahu, so my family goes back to Kipahulu on Maui. But basically, I'm a newcomer to this whole struggle. It's been going on for many decades, and many people here have been a part of that, and so I really respect them for all the work that they've done and the groundwork that they laid for this case, because the Waiahole case and the Ripon case are like, I think Isaac calls them gifts that keep on giving. We keep finding things in them that are so awesome and that still help us today in our legal battles. And I really mean that. But the other thing is that I know that in the movie, Kau'i said we have to be practitioners. And that is so important. Like, us as attorneys, we're not the heroes. We're really low on the totem pole, I would say, because if it wasn't for the practitioners, if it wasn't for our people continuing these traditions, there's really nothing that we can do to do that. It's much, much harder to bring back a tradition that's been lost through the law. It's much, without people who are there, who are practicing, who are saying, I'm practicing now, I want to, but I can't because there's no water. We can't do anything because we don't have people there who are stakeholders, who have an interest in that. So, I know you saw in the video, Alan Murakami, he's still around, still going. You know, this started at least 20 years ago. And Uncle Ed in the video, he's been a long-time warrior, as well as Mahelani. She was briefly in there, but she didn't do any talking. She was our previous executive director. And the part of the case that I've been involved in didn't even start till 2001. And the process that we're in right now has been going on for that long. And I wanted to give you some kind of big picture ideas of what's happening out there, because it's one thing to see, okay, they don't have much water, and to see the sugarcane growing, but it's hard to grasp how much water we're talking about. And I think Uncle Ed said it, about 160 million gallons per day on average. That means much more on some days and probably not much less actually on other days when it's dry. But that's about as much as Oahu uses domestically every day. Oahu, right? How many more people do we have on Oahu than Maui? So many more. It's kind of mind-blowing. It's hard to imagine. And so the system of tunnels that they talked about that were being built in the late 1800s, they stretch several miles, and they include tunnels, dikes, and several ditches. This is not one ditch, this is a series, it's a whole complex, where they've really tried to squeeze every drop out of East Maui as possible to divert to the Central Plain to water sugarcane, which this is really the last sugar company in the islands. It's so intensive in water use, it's so impractical in water use that the fact that they're still growing sugarcane out there is pretty outrageous, I would say. But so we're talking about that expanse, and over 100 streams are being diverted. We actually don't know how many, because some of these ditches and dikes are so high up in the mountains, and the mountains are really steep. So if you can imagine, the streams are coming down into the valleys, and these tunnels and ditches come across, and they swipe that water as they go. So when you look at it as in a total percentage, what we've been struggling over for the last maybe 3 years is trying to get maybe 20% of that water back to East Maui. 20%. That means 80% is going out of the watershed. And the water code that Uncle Charlie helped write protects first those in-stream uses. It protects the stream, it's supposed to. The off-stream uses are not the priority. And so why do we have, the vast majority of the water coming out of East Maui? And we have kalo farmers and we have people who can't fish, who can't farm, who can't gather from those streams and support their daily life because there's a corporation who needs to make money. So, is that a good background?
So where is the case right now?
So the case right now, the 2001 event that I was talking about were petitions to the Water Commission to set in-stream flow standards. And what those are levels that are designed to protect things like wildlife, the fisheries, native Hawaiian tradition and customs. So those are all considered public trust purposes in the stream. The Water Commission in East Maui, that's all they do. They're not a permitting agency for East Maui because it's not what's called a designated water management area like in Navaiha. So their sole job is to set the in-stream flow standards. The law requires that they act within 180 days to set those flow standards. So if we look back at 2001, we're about a decade late. They did agree to flow standards in 2008 after about 5 years of waiting for studies from the United States Geological Service. And those studies combined with Department of Aquatic Resources studies determined that in order to minimally protect these streams and the species that depend on them, you have to restore at least 64% of the base flow. Now in total volume of water, we're still talking less than 20% of the water. That's that minimal baseline protection. In 2008, there was a settlement on 8 streams where the majority of the kalo farmers are, and our clients are. And so they were able to have some water restored. For the remaining 19 streams, the commission first was going to restore 1 stream. And then they chose to restore 5 streams for half the year, and only to the baseline level. So at the point we're at now, we asked for a contested case on that decision. The commission said we don't have a right to a contested case because no person in the public has an interest or right to protect the public interest in these stream flows. So basically, we have to trust them to do their job, and if anybody has a right, it'd be the company because they happen to have all the water right now. And so we appealed that to the Intermediate Court of Appeals. It got dismissed on a technicality. We went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave it back to the Intermediate Court and said, look, you got to decide. So we're waiting for now is whether we have a right to contest the case hearing on their decision. So yes. So a contested case hearing, it's a procedure for citizens, for people in the public to challenge an agency's decision. So it's not in court, it's before the agency. It's supposed to be a little bit more relaxed so the everyday people can do that. And that's what we try to do, but they said no, cannot.
Question. What about the organisms that can't contest the case? Like, can you guys contest for them?
So they're saying no, we can't, because okay. He asked, what about the organisms, the stream species that depend on that flow? If we can contest it for them, and the answer was no. Well, the answer from the agency was no, because that's what we were doing. We were fighting to protect, in these streams, gathering practices. And really, for there to be gathering, there has to be a healthy stream, there has to be healthy species. Minimum protection may not even get us there. And that's what basically we were fighting for. And they said, no, we cannot.
How much of the water do they use for
That's a good question. But we have not been, if we were in a contested case, we would get evidence, right? And it would go to a hearings officer and it'd be entered into the record. What we had instead were public hearings. So they were able to give numbers and say we're using this much water and we have this study. But in the end, what I'll say is they're using approximately, or they're diverting approximately 80% of the water, right? Or more, because we wanted 20% back. How much they're applying to their fields, it's not really clear. It's about, 7,000 gallons per day? Yeah, 7,000 gallons per day. And it's really confusing how they gave us the numbers, but basically what it looks like to us is that at any given time they're applying about 33,000 gallons to one field in one day, which in the end, the way we see it is they're water banking. They're using as much water as they can so that when they have developments, like one is coming up in Waiale, they will have water to serve those developments. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question because I don't really know. And that was one reason for asking for a contested case, is that if you're going to make decisions to allow diversions, basically what this stream flow standard does, that without even having proper, besides that it violates the law at the extent that they're doing it, but without even having real evidence in front of them is a crime.
So they can divert the water to a development without some extra permission or hearing or whatever?
They don't have the developments now.
I know, but it's...
Yeah, they will need permits down the line. But in the meantime, they get to keep, as long as they can say, we need all this water, and don't take any because we're going to shut down and lose 800 jobs and this many millions of dollars. So don't take a drop away from us.
I think I'll come at it from a slightly different perspective and forget about rights for a minute. Well, for one thing, sugar is a very curious thing, and I've done some research on this, and I know that in 1700 in England, the per capita consumption of sugar was 4 pounds per person per year. And by 1900, it was up to 100 pounds per person per year. And now in the United States, I think it's 120 or something like that, which is per person per year, which is a couple of 5-gallon buckets, I think, of sugar, which is kind of awesome when you think about that. Another funny thing about sugar is that I read somewhere that there's been some speculation that one of the reasons why Britain lost the Revolutionary War, one reason why the United States became independent, is that Britain had committed too many of their troops to protecting their sugar plantations, and they didn't want to pull them away from there to come over and fight this war in America. So maybe the United States owes its independence in some small degree to sugar. But if you look at it these water rights and these cases from an ecological point of view, from an environmental point of view, well, for one thing, especially if you look at Tao, everybody knows the story about the older brother, Tao being the older brother of all Hawaiians, that kind of stuff. But what they don't realize is what the ecological basis for that is. And the other two older brothers would either be ulu, would be breadfruit if you're looking at starches, or would be sweet potatoes. And you can rule out ulu right away because that's seasonal. And you certainly are not going to rely on something that's not there a good part of the year to be your older brother. And sweet potatoes, if you're growing them anywhere away from the river, and we're talking, pre-contact times, if you get a 1-month dry spell, or it could even be a long 2-week dry spell, and you now have to water this, you're talking about going to the river, filling up your gourd, walking to wherever your patch is, pouring out the water, and by the time you've made all of those trips, probably the calories that you burn far exceed the calories in the potatoes that you're going to harvest at some point. So when it came right down to it, something that you can water constantly that doesn't require a whole lot of calories of energy to do it is the one that's going to be your older brother. So that makes taro, that makes kalo really, really important. And nowadays, you know, we're talking, it's all the rage to be talking sustainability and buy local and eat local and all this kind of stuff. So if we look at that seriously, then who is everybody's older brother? Again, you know, so we're kind of back at looking at, well, if we're really serious about growing starch, and starch is the important thing that we need to grow, vegetables and fruits is one thing, but for the bulk of your calories, we're talking starch. Then those taro patches, those lands that could be in taro, that aren't in taro, they become really important all over again. Which means that you got to look at all of our streams and look at all those lands that are connected with those streams and say, what's still there? You know, what could we do? How could we do that? And we're talking gravity flow, which is basically what the Hawaiians, you know, it's common sense, right? You gravity flow something down to where you need it, and that's how you irrigate. So that makes it really important. At the same time, besides starch, protein is really important. And the best source of protein for our island culture is the ocean. And that's where those, you know, they talked about that, the estuaries and those nearshore waters, that's where they're super important, really, really important to have that fresh water flowing there. So maybe you could have the East Maui irrigation system diverting all this water to central Maui. Maybe you plant a whole pile of taro over there and use that water to irrigate it. But what about the ocean? And it's not enough to just, you know, dump this water into the ocean in one place. It's the fact that we have fresh water going into the ocean in so many places that makes it so important. For example, Kanawai Bay. Kanawai Bay is actually considered to be the largest. It's not like a classic estuary, you know. It's not like some places on the mainland, like Chesapeake Bay or some places like that. But it's considered the largest estuary in the Pacific. And it has all these streams that empty into it. And besides all those streams, you have all of these different freshwater springs that come out in the ocean. So all those sources of water into the ocean are really important, and they need to be thought about and considered a lot more. For example, the Kona coast. Everybody knows that's a fantastic place to fish. You know, you catch big fish off the Kona coast, and the reason that happens, they've done some infrared mapping of fresh water, and you can see a big line out in the ocean which shows where that fresh water is. So all that fresh water coming out into the coast over, you know, out into the coastline over there, and there are no streams there. That's the key to that fishery. And that's something, those nearshore fisheries have basically never, ever been studied in Hawaii, never. Nobody's seriously looked at them. And in our first water case, we couldn't even bring that up in our Waihe'e water case because a negative, what they call a negative environmental impact had been filed by the Board of Water Supply, where they said, it was a one-sentence thing that said there will be no environmental impact. And if you didn't object within 180 days, then you couldn't even argue that. So we were stuck with arguing rights, you know, the Kuleana rights and riparian rights to this water. And in the Waiho'ole case, that was the first time that we could argue a broad spectrum of things, including the nearshore waters. And we tried to, I wish we could have got even more information about nearshore waters into the case than we did, but it was hard because a lot of that information wasn't there, and a lot of it is anecdotal. You know, if you asked a lot of fishermen, oh, where do you fish? Oh, where? You know, where that fresh water is coming in. You know, they would know that kind of stuff, but nobody's ever really studied that. So if you look at water rights from a sustainability, food, ecological, environmental issue, then it takes on a whole different light, I think.
Absolutely. I think somebody at one of the hearings that I went to, one local guy, he said, you know, they're taking all our water and they're giving us back diabetes because they're making sugar, you know. And one thing that I think the state and the commission and even the public doesn't fully consider is they look at, oh, well, you want to have cultural rights, you want to grow kalo, you know, but we got jobs and this is about making money and the company needs to make money. But we should really be looking at value, right? Because these families, they live out there. They're able to have a livelihood off their kalo, which is pretty amazing. But they're in one place, they're not impacting, you know, other people by taking the water and diverting it and dropping it somewhere else. That water goes back into the stream, goes back into the ocean. They're able to support, what they do actually supports the ecosystem, right? They're not taking away from it. And, you know, that is an area where people probably, a lot of them left because they could no longer feed themselves. So they're talking about feeding themselves outside from their yard, from their lo'i, rather than packaging up a product, or even the raw product now, shipping it off to another processing facility thousands of miles away, only to have it shipped back and packaged into something that we're all trying not to eat anymore. You know? So, I mean, if worst comes to worst, we can't survive on just sugar, right? But we could survive on kalo, we could survive on the fish, the limu that all of that supports. So it seems like there's a shift in the public thinking. But even at the last hearing that I was at in 2010, you have the Hawaii Farm Bureau, you have other small farmers actually supporting the diversion because they get a very small percentage from that diversion. So, you know, it's really a battle that goes far beyond just these farmers and the company. It goes into the public and the state and the agencies that are responsible for making sure that our resources are protected, not just for these kalo farmers, but for generations into the future.
The other thing to think about is, and you touched on it some, about the development and these guys basically water banking, and that's kind of what's been going on in this state since statehood, actually. The highest and best use of land is to build something on it. And that's been what's driving our economy since statehood and maybe even before. So all of these large landowners, they're not gonna just say, well, you know, forget the sugarcane, it's not profitable or something, we'll just take that out of business, because they need the tax breaks of keeping something in agriculture. So they keep the tax breaks, keep agriculture going, and then as they need to develop, then they just take that land out of agriculture. And we see that happening, you know, that's obvious what's happening on this island with the whole Pili development. It's basically, in our Waihole water case, the top city planner he was testifying, he was saying, oh, we have development plans and we have a general plan and all this land is all protected for agriculture. And he got asked the question, well, has any development ever been turned down in central Oahu? And he thought for a while and he said, yes, one. They said, oh, well, what happened to that one? Oh, it was ultimately approved. And so we see exactly what we predicted was going to happen, was that this land is not really, you know, they don't really care that much about it for agriculture. They want it for development, and that's what drives our economy. And if you want to survive in this economy, you want a construction job. Those are the jobs that really pay. And so that's a really tough question. Back in I think it was the late 80s, the state did a study for the large landowners about basically what to do with all of their lands that were going to be going out of sugar. And at that time, this was after the Waiholi land use struggle, where the plan was to build, I don't know, 7,000, I forget, 5,000 or 7,000 homes in Waiholi Valley, and the people fought against that. They testified at the Land Use Commission, and things were starting to get pretty rowdy, and so the state ended up stepping in and acquiring the valley from the landowner and turning it into what they call an agricultural park, where everybody who was already living there kind of got grandfathered in, and all the farming got grandfathered in. So when the state did this study in the 80s, and this was after the Waiholi fight, one of the recommendations to the large landowners was, when your land goes out of sugarcane, if you're going to lease to farmers, make sure you don't allow them to live on your land. Because then, like Waiholi, you won't be able to get them off when you want to develop. So that's been the prevailing land use policy in Hawaii, is just hang on to it and develop it. And it's even true, this has even affected the water case, because in our water case, it was easy compared to the East Maui one. The East Maui one, all that water goes to a section of Maui that doesn't really have other sources of water. I mean, they do have some wells, but they're not that much, and those wells are having an increasingly difficult time with salinity because of, well, this has to do with global warming and reduced rainfall. So that water for development over there is really important. But on Oahu, in the Ewa Plain in central Oahu, there's groundwater there, and they can pump water. And in fact, the sugar company, maybe half the water that they used, or maybe even more, was water that they pumped from groundwater wells and used for agriculture. And it was actually, that water is competitive as far as cost, the pumping cost, with maintaining the ditch. So it wasn't like this ditch was cheap water. You know, the pumping the water was not all that expensive. And what they did was, what these large landowners did was, they basically turned all of that groundwater over to the Board of Water Supply, and then they said, we don't have any groundwater anymore. And so what the commission has done, and this is still an issue in our case, is they basically have reserved all groundwater for urban development. They're supposed to have had hearings on that, but they never had hearings, and when we went to court over that issue, we didn't get anywhere. So that groundwater, and there is groundwater there that can be pumped and could be used for agriculture, but it's reserved for urban development. And so, you know, we're talking sustainability, but in the meantime, we have to keep building and building and building and building. My wife hears this all the time. You know, I hear it on the radio. Housing starts are up, or housing starts are down. You know, and that's either if housing starts, they never ever say housing starts, new housing starts are down. That's good news. You never ever hear that, never. So that is kind of like, for me, is the bottom line issue. And it's in a paper that's in the value of Hawaii. But since the 1970s, the United States has been developing ag land at the rate of 2 acres a minute. It's like 2 football fields a minute. And that's about 1 million acres a year. And in the Central Valley in California, which produces about 1/4 of all of the nation's vegetables, I think, they're developing land there at the rate of 15,000 acres a year. You drive through there and you see for sale, for sale, for sale, for sale. So there's some serious issues that are, serious debts that are going to have to be paid at some point. And the United States, we like to, you know, everybody likes to brag about what a great nation we are. Well, we're a great nation because we have the best, with the best climate farmland of any country in the world. So of course we're the greatest. You know, if you've got the best land, then you're the greatest. That's basically what it comes down to. Those are the broad issues, at least from my point of view.
And there's one thing that Uncle Ed mentioned that I think is important to consider for East Maui, and what makes it unique too is that he said the water is being taken from 33,000 acres of former crown lands. Those are lands that were personal to the Ali'i. Ceded lands were public lands and crown lands. Crown lands were personal to those Ali'i. So now we have Hawaiians who want to protect the watershed. You know, when you take too much water out, you have alien species coming in, you have a decreased capacity for that watershed to really do its functions as it's supposed to. And you have people whose livelihood depends on this water, and yet the state is allowing it to be diverted at this time without even proper permits. So it hasn't had a water license, the company has not had water licenses or long-term leases since 1978. They have had what's called revocable permits, so year to year, they're supposed to be reviewed. NHLC came in and challenged those, and one of those challenges in about 2001, 2003, was to prevent the Board of Land and Natural Resources from issuing 30-year water licenses to the company for continued diversions. And what the court said is you've got to at least do an environmental assessment, you know, and probably that'll result in an impact statement. But they didn't do that. They haven't done that yet. They were waiting for the commission to set the flow standards so they know what levels need to be left in the stream to protect the stream species. And on top of that, the permits are also not being renewed. So there is no permit, there is no lease, there is no official authority for the company to keep taking the water. So how come they're still taking it? It's because it comes down to enforcement, right? It's only as good as the people enforcing it. And I had a politician.
By force the water back. When all it takes is a little bit of something to crack accidentally to get that water back, and it shows a lot of restraint and how much respect they have for authority, you know, behind on and not going against, as opposed to the company who clearly doesn't have any of those.
Absolutely. Our people are so have so much faith in the law and do everything right, and we can't accept that other people don't follow the law. And it's interesting you say that, because one of our farmers, when they went up with the monitor, part of the plan was for those first 8 streams for the kalo, was that if there's any issues, if you're not getting enough water downstream, you can come back to the commission and we'll go out there, we'll study it, and we'll help you out, right? And they went back with the water monitor, Morris Aka, and they said, look, you know, our fields are dry, our lo'is are dry, our kalo are dying, you know. You know how long it takes to grow kalo. Like, to lose your crop is devastating. So they showed him that, they showed him what was going on, they showed him that there's, you know, water trickling out through the diversion when there's supposed to be more in there. And he started saying, oh, you know, there's really not much I can do, oh, I can, you know, I'll have to go talk to my bosses, and waffled around. So one of the farmers went and lifted the gate. In that case, the diversion was a gate. And he lifted it and let the water flow. And after that, it was like a battle. Like, who could get up there? Who could close the gate? Who could open the gate? And Alan sent a letter to them and said, you better not punish my guy for opening the gate, because he's fully within his rights, right? If you have a diversion upstream, you're growing kalo, you have a right to that downstream water. That upstream user is not supposed to injure you, not supposed to take more than they're allowed. And so he went up and he did that. And in the end, the company agreed to let it stay up. But imagine that. Our guys have to go and ask permission and get a license and get insurance to go and weed whack upstream, up Mauka, so that more water will come down to their lo'i, into areas which is licensed to the company. And the state says, well, you better go get an agreement. You know, you got to go ask them for permission so you can go and clean up there.
What should we be surprised if you catch Mount Florida without a license?
That's true.
One of the complications in East Maui, I don't know if this is still true, but when there was a governor's commission to study the whole idea of having a water code, which Hawaii didn't have. And so I was on that commission, and one of the things we did is we went to every single island, to different places on the island, and we had hearings and talked to people about the idea of having a water code. And I already knew that there were water conflicts in Maui, because I talked to people, and so I figured that when we had the hearing in Hana, that people would stand up and say, they need to release this water. And we had the hearing, and no one stood up and said anything. And the problem is that either they or their friends or somebody they knew was working for the ditch company. And so people were afraid to say anything or do anything. And that's part of the problem, is that these companies, their connections are so broad and so wide, and it's not only an upper level, it's people's jobs, and so people get scared about doing something like that or saying something. It makes it a tough issue, because they take advantage of that to get communities fighting against each other.
The hearing was that the commission, or not the commission, sorry, the company bussed in just loads of mostly Hawaiians and probably, and a lot of Filipino workers too, wearing blue shirts saying share the water. But all their testimony was, please don't take any water from the company, we need the jobs. And what we've been trying to tell them, and this applies not just to this situation but everywhere, is that if you protect the Hawaiian traditions and customs, if you protect the resource like you're supposed to, it benefits everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. Like if you give to the Hawaiians, you take from the company, you take from the people of Maui. That's not really true, because when you take care of the resource as a whole, when you take care of these traditions that depend on healthy resources, you ensure that those resources are there tomorrow, that they're there 30, 40, 100 years from now, that the watershed is not decreasing in the amount of water that is available anymore. And it's not as if Hawaiians were saying, put all the water back, which, frankly they could have. Because at this point, if you can say you don't know how much you need to protect the streams, to protect the resources, you're supposed to leave it in, because that's the precautionary principle. That's the safe thing to do, to protect the resource, right? But they weren't even saying that. We're saying, put 20% back.
And they could, if they grew something, if they grew vegetables or
anything
other than sugar, you'd be talking about them using probably 3 times less water.
Yeah.
So in other words, they could restore a tremendous amount to the streams and grow the kind of food that everybody needs. And you would think that would be a win-win situation, except that it's not, like I said earlier, it's not about growing food, it's about growing houses. And so they want all of that. They want to hang on to all of that water.
And one thing they say is, well, we don't know if we put the water back in the streams, if it's really going to help the stream. We don't even know if it's going to reach the ocean and help the species that need it to get up Mauka. But from what was restored in those 8 streams, and from what one of the farmers did when he lifted that gate and let more water down through Wailunui, they're seeing improvement already. And that was only in 2008, 2009, 2010. They're seeing fish in the ocean, they're seeing opai in the streams, big ones. Stuff that we don't like to talk about too much, because then they say, well, then you don't need any more water. But it's not just to have one stream, healthy with these species. But it is good news that, even with some of that water back, it does a lot for the ecology, for the stream species, and for the whole ecosystem.
In the Waihoʻoli water case, when the sugar company went out of business, they basically started dumping water down Kipapa Gulch and just running it down that side. And so there was a whole segment of the case which was, wait, don't just dump it in that gulch, put it back into the streams on our side of the island where it's supposed to go, because you're not using it. You think that would be very logical. they tried to make the argument that in order to restore water to Waihole Stream, you'd have to do an environmental impact statement because the stream had been without water for so long that there could be a negative environmental impact from putting the water back. That was one of the arguments. And another argument was that you shouldn't put the water back into the stream because then you get all these endangered species, you know, all these opu and opai and all those kinds of things coming back to the stream, and then when they wanted to take the water away, they wouldn't be able to do it because all these endangered species were there. And these were, you know, public statements that were made. And like you said about the impact of restoring water, when they did, so they lost that argument and they did have to put that water back into Waihole Stream. And the guy was running the biggest fish pond in Kanawai Bay out by Kuloa Ranch, which had been in continuous operation for forever. And what he would do is he would go to the mouths of streams and he would catch the babies of various species and stock his pond. That was just the way that you stock the pond, is you would go to the mouths of streams where those fish would hang out in that very brackish water, which the big predators wouldn't want to come in. And so these fish could basically, you know, the babies could hang out there and thumb their noses at the big fish on the outside. So what this guy noticed running the fish pond is that in all the years that he was running it, one year he'd go to one stream mouth and catch the fish and stock his pond. The next year he'd have to go someplace else. So he'd have to keep switching streams, go back and forth, because the numbers of babies wouldn't be there consistently from year to year. And he noticed that when that water was returned to Waihole Stream and you had this bigger estuary, he now found that he could collect anywhere all the time because of this brackish water. So it did have a very positive impact putting that water back into the stream.
So one last thought from me, I don't know if you're ready to close it, but I just had a politician tell our organization, he came to give a spiel, but he said, I heard all these sovereignty guys, and I looked at the law, and when I look at it, I don't think it's legal, and I think it's a total waste of time. And I told him, for one thing, why do you think people want it still? And because he said, the things that happen, they happen in the past. And I said, if you look at East Maui, the things that happened in the past are happening today. The law's not being followed, the water's being taken, our people are suffering, daily. Why do you think they want to change? Because the authorities are not protecting them as they're supposed to. It's not all the company wants to make money, we know that. But what about the stewards, the people who are supposed to enforce this public trust for everyone? So, anyway, that's made me feel really upset.
Any more questions? Comments?
I had a question. I mean, I can say the question, and if it helps spark discussion, if you guys are willing to stay, then we can just go as long as you guys can say. But in terms of strategy, I guess, like with bringing a case, how does that happen? Like, is it just one person that just wants, like, how does all that happen?
It's a big question.
Or I guess another way to phrase it is like, to support water rights, I guess, what is a way to get involved and advocate for that?
I'd say education is key. In the Waihole case, we realized that we weren't going to get help from the government because they just didn't have the resources, for one, to find solutions to the water issues that we were talking about. So we had to go and find the experts, find the people to come and testify, talk about everything, and that was really important to get all of those people. And we couldn't rely on just saying, well, they have wells, they have another source of water. We actually had to go out, do the numbers, do the research on wells, find out how much there was there, what the costs were. We had to do all of that research. And basically, you have to solve all the problems that they might come up with to say that why they can't do something. You have to solve all those problems. And if you don't, then you're going to have a much harder time. And then the other thing was, I mean, we went to so many different communities and talked to people, so many different communities, because basically what it comes down to is if you can convince enough of the public that what you're doing is a good thing and the right thing and benefits them too, then it becomes a done deal. Then the decisions get made in the right way. So it's time consuming. It's incredibly time consuming. Our contested case lasted for 5 months, I think. And the only place that they could hold it, there's like these meeting rooms in the airport in the inter-island terminal in the very top floor above everything. And that was the only place that they could get where they could book those rooms for a long enough time period. So for 3, 4, sometimes 5 days a week, we'd all truck down to the airport and go up there, and that's where the hearings were held for hours every single day. So it is a time-consuming thing, as you know. Yeah, and that's one of the difficulties.
Yeah, the Kanawai case took 3 years of contested case hearings back and forth, and we haven't even gotten to contested case after 10 years. But there's a lot that everyone can do in their own way. I mean, those who are practitioners, and I don't think you have to be a full-time practitioner to support, to do that. Any little thing that you can do, if you're growing kalo, if you are gathering on those streams, if you are there, that helps because you know the effects immediately, a lot sooner than these agency officials who visit there maybe twice a year. We need hydrologists, we need we need biologists, we need marine biologists. Somebody told me when I was in college, we don't need any more lawyers, we need all these other things, and I thought, yeah, okay, I don't know how to do that. But you realize, man, we can't do a lot without these experts, right? And the experts are really helpful in helping to prove what we know already, a lot of times, giving that scientific data that people seem to need for comfort. But we also have little things that people can do. There were a lot of letters to the editor during the course of the hearings that we had, and we had public hearings. So folks could show up and testify and give, talk to the commission directly, give their testimony, their feelings, what they wanted. And this battle in the newspapers went on it's still going on, it's not over. And that's something anybody can do, right? You can support the cause. You don't have to be from Maui because there's not that many people that live in East Maui. But it really affects all of us, and it affects in many different ways. And so the more support that you can give in those ways, even in educating people about it, if you live here, if you live there, and you can talk to farmers, or you can talk to those who are opposing it. There's somewhere a diversified agriculture part we're supporting it. And I think there's so much misunderstanding because there's so much propaganda put out there by the company that I don't think the general public really realizes how much water they actually have and how simple a solution it could be if they just change their crop, right? They said that the last hearing, we're going to get federal money so we can study for 2 years whether or not sugarcane is a good biofuel, good crop for biofuel. And so we need time, so just keep letting the water flow so that we can study that right now. And we said, sugar companies have been shutting down for decades. You should have an idea that your company is going to have trouble, that you can't make a profit on sugar. They've been losing money every year for the last few years, right? They're actually losing money on agriculture. And yet they don't have the foresight and the planning for this. I don't buy that.
If you're
right?
lucky, Monsanto will come and buy them.
Oh, right.
And then they use way less water and restore the water.
Right, they'll grow corn.
High fructose corn syrup.
But so, I mean, really, that's what it's about, is they want to build.
So, okay, go ahead.
So right now,
No. Well, that's a good question. Right, it is before the Intermediate Court of Appeals, but the Commission didn't deny us on standing. So the Commission didn't say, well, let's look at how many people are really here. You guys don't really gather, not to mention that there's no water in the stream, so you can't really gather because there's no species. But they didn't say that. They didn't say you don't have anything to lose, so you don't get a contested case. They said that when the Commission is deciding in-stream flow standards that are supposed to protect the public trust, they're not really affecting anybody's rights. They said, we're just setting a flow that has to be in a stream at a particular point in time. That's it. You know, if you want to claim you're affected, wait till they get to the permitting process, which, as I said, has been stalled in a contested case before the Board of Land and Natural Resources that's been open for the last 8 years, and nothing's happening. So wait for the permitting process. That's when we'll decide how much water the company can take, ignoring that they're still taking it as we go. You know, it's not as if they're stopping. So we'd be in a different situation if they're trying to set flows and the water's in the stream.
I wonder how fast they figure it out if the pipeline got damaged somehow and the water just started to flow back somehow. I wonder how quickly they figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, well, as you know, it happened on Molokai. But yeah, you know, it's getting to that point, and it's not a commodity. Yeah, for us, this is life. So yeah, they're lucky. I think people are lucky here that Hawaiians are really peaceful. And when you show up at these meetings, I mean, you're at a public hearing, and there are DoCare, Department of Land and Natural Resources officers are lined up around the building. And there's never been any violence. And it's not just this. I've been to burial council meetings where we've had contentious issues, and same thing, all these officers with their guns and their holsters are lined up ready, you know, to protect the landowner, to protect the company. And we're never even violent, you know? It's just like, this is ridiculous, you know?
Because they know how well within our grounds we would be to just take it back. When you're talking about people's lives, talking about water, in Thailand, they just steal them.
Well, that's what happened back in the day.
That costs too much money, so then they go. And you can replace it.
Yeah. So back, I mean, Kanawai, right? The laws in Hawaii. There were laws specifically for kalo, for water. Who got to take when and what time, and you got to divert for this long, then you had to, you know, pass it on to the next person whose turn it was. If you take more than you're entitled to, and if you block up the ditch unfairly, you ended up in the ditch. You know, that's how serious it was. And so, I mean, that just tells us, Kanawai, how important that water was to our people, to our life. And when the company talks about, you heard them say, water going in the stream to the ocean is waste. You know, how can you waste water by letting it flow to the ocean? It's just like a slap in the face for us, because none of that is wasted, right? None of that water is wasted, even in the ocean. It's feeding us, it's feeding the fish, it's feeding the limu, and it's feeding more than just our physical bodies.
So, thank you very much, you guys, for having me and them for coming today. Just to recap, this is the Public Health Movie Night series. It's a month mean, probably all of you guys are already know the importance of this issue, but so happy to have you guys here, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for your patience. And if you guys are willing to stay after, if people want to ask you guys questions just for a little bit, if you guys were to try to ask them.
Thank you. And if you didn't sign in, we have a little sign-up sheet. And if you do want to come to more public health movie nights, put your email on there and I can add you. And presumably next time the movie will not be an hour late. Thank you all.